Let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're taking a close look at the highly anticipated, fully redesigned Framework Laptop 13 Pro. Now, if you've been following the tech space, you know Framework has basically been the poster child for the right-to-repair movement, right? They make laptops you can completely tear down and upgrade yourself. But this new Pro version, it's a completely different beast. We're talking massive across-the-board upgrades that put it right up there with the industry heavyweights. But as we're going to see, it also comes with a pretty wild twist that really threw reviewers for a loop. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a look at the major redesign, check out the performance and battery, dig into the repairability and its unique quirks, talk about a massive pricing shock, and then wrap up with the final verdict.
All right, Section 1. A major redesign. Premium CNC aluminum and a stunning display.
The physical hardware here is a massive departure from older models. Framework has finally made the jump to a premium CNC machined aluminum chassis. If you ever got your hands on the older versions, you might remember they had this slightly bendy feel, flexing a bit if you held them with one hand. Well, that is entirely gone. Reviewers say this new aluminum has a really unique, almost velvety coating. Sure, the black finish is definitely going to attract some fingerprints, but the structural integrity is just fantastic. It comes in at 3.17 pounds and just over half an inch thick, which puts its footprint right in line with a modern 13-inch MacBook Pro.
Then there's the screen, which is honestly one of the biggest upgrades here. It's Framework's first custom panel, and their very first touchscreen on a 13-inch model. We're looking at a 13.5-inch 2880 by 1920 display with a variable refresh rate pushing up to 120 Hz. But the real kicker? The brightness. It hits an absolutely incredible 709 nits. I mean, that completely blows past the mini LED panel on the MacBook Pro, which hovers around 558 nits, and it totally outshines the Asus ZenBook's OLED. If you're the kind of person who likes to work outside in the sun, this thing is a powerhouse.
They've totally overhauled the inputs too. The keyboard now gives you a really solid 1.5 millimeters of key travel. And right below that is Framework's first ever haptic touchpad using 4 piezo sensors. That is a massive step up from their old mechanical trackpads, giving you this perfectly even, satisfying click anywhere on the glass. Now, it's not absolutely flawless. Some reviewers did mention that while the main chassis feels ultra premium, the magnetic screen bezel still feels just a little bit plasticky in comparison.
Moving on to Section 2. Performance and battery. Power meets thermal reality. So let's see how all this translates to actual performance under the hood. Framework is packing these with Intel's brand new Panther Lake Core Ultra Series 3 chips, alongside an AMD option. If we look at the Geekbench 6 multi-core scores, the top-tier Core Ultra X9 388H inside this framework is fast, scoring just over 14,500. But here's the catch. When you stack it up against the Asus ZenBook Duo, which is running the exact same Intel chip, the framework falls about 15% behind. And it significantly trails Apple's M5 MacBook Pro. It does have incredibly fast storage, though. That WD Black SSD is copying files at a class-leading 2,800 megabytes per second. But why exactly is the CPU lagging behind other machines with the identical chip?
While it all comes down to the cooling, Framework is relying on a single fan to cool this absolute monster of a mobile chip. And frankly, physics just gets in the way. Under heavy stress testing, things got uncomfortably hot. Reviewers were recording a 110-degree Fahrenheit keyboard, a 90-degree touchpad, and a localized hotspot on the bottom hitting a staggering 117 degrees. Internally, the CPU is hitting 90 degrees Celsius and aggressively thermal throttling. It's basically the reality of trying to cram a sports car engine into a chassis with just a single exhaust fan.
But there is a massive silver lining to this new architecture, and that is battery life. The new 74 watt-hour battery is a total triumph. On a modern office mixed-use test, this laptop just kept going, clocking in at 1,082 minutes. That is nearly 16 hours of continuous use. It absolutely dominates every single Windows competitor in its class, trailing only the famously efficient MacBook Pro.
Okay, Section 3. Repairability and Quirks, the core identity. Pivoting back to the very core of Framework's mission, we run into some really fascinating quirks. On the Intel models, a standout feature is the new memory standard they're using, called LPChem2. It's highly power efficient and super fast, but it is not like swapping out traditional RAM sticks. Reviewers pointed out that you have to perfectly align this module onto a highly sensitive interposer on the motherboard, which just so happens to sit right next to a delicate screen ribbon cable. You can technically do the whole thing with a single Torx T5 screwdriver they include in the box, but you are definitely going to need a steady hand. Meanwhile, if you decide to go with the AMD Ryzen AI 300 version of this laptop, they actually skip that new LPCAM2 entirely and stick with standard SO-DIMM memory sticks, which totally avoids that installation stress. But because this is a modular system with hot swappable ports, the AMD version brings its own unique quirk to the table. You actually can't place standard USB-A expansion cards in the rear slots because they draw too much power for that specific motherboard layout. It's a really interesting trade-off, basically meaning AMD users have to carefully plan out exactly where they want to plug in their accessories.
Section 4. The pricing shock. The cost of modularity.
So right as reviewers were weighing all these pros and cons, the amazing screen and battery versus the thermal throttling, a massive twist disrupted the entire review cycle. Initially, reviewers were testing a fully configured DIY unit with that top-tier X9 processor and 64 gigabytes of that new LPCAM2 RAM. Based on the pricing at the time, this exact setup was expected to cost around $3,272. Now, expensive? Absolutely. But for a premium CNC-machined, fully modular laptop, it was pretty justifiable for its target audience.
But then, literally right in the middle of the review period, there was a global spike in LPCAM2 memory prices. Almost overnight, the price for that exact same 64GB configuration shot up to a staggering $4,023. The sticker shock was so extreme that Framework had to make a really drastic move. They completely dropped the 64GB option on new orders. Just gone. Even wilder, they had to reach out to customers who had pending 32GB orders and downgrade them to 16GB, just so they could honor the original price those people had already paid. It really shines a light on the extreme volatility and the financial vulnerability of building a company around cutting-edge modular components.
Finally, Section 5. The final verdict. Is modularity worth the premium?
Let's wrap this up by looking at who this laptop is actually built for compared to the traditional market titans. Ultimately, outlets like Tom's Hardware are universally calling this the definitive Framework laptop. They absolutely love the premium sturdy build, that gorgeous 700+ nit screen, the massive 16-hour battery life, and its stellar out-of-the-box compatibility with modern Linux distros like Ubuntu and Fedora. If you want a laptop that truly respects your freedom and runs Linux natively, it is an absolute dream.
But you can't just ignore the realities here. That massive, volatile price tag is a really tough pill to swallow. And the thermal reality of trying to cool top-tier processors with just one fan means you're definitely leaving some performance on the table, all while dealing with a laptop that gets pretty darn hot on your lap.
Which brings us to the ultimate comparison. If you have $4,000 to burn, an M5 Max MacBook Pro is going to absolutely destroy the Framework in raw performance per dollar, thermals, and graphics. But you completely give up your right to repair. If one single component fails on that Mac out of warranty, you're paying to replace the entire board. With the Framework, you literally just swap out the broken part.
So I'll leave you with this question to ponder, because it really is the core dilemma of this amazing machine. As component costs continue to skyrocket, is the noble dream of true repairability and actual device ownership worth that financial sacrifice? Or does raw, uncompromised power for your dollar still reign supreme? Think about what you value most in your tech. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.